Okay, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Catherine Zoka, and I'm co-chair of PEER, Progressive East End uh, Reformers, Revolutionaries, whatever you want to put to that R word. We like to start our meetings with a land acknowledgement. Most of PEER's members live on the land of the Shinnecock, Montaukett, and Manhasset Nations, lands here on Long Island. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, PEER is a progressive grassroots organization. We are focused on social justice, healthcare, housing, and issues that affect the lives of all Long Islanders. And I will drop in the chat how you can join PEER shortly. And if you would like to join us, we appreciate that. PEER is a chapter of NIPAN, and NIPAN is the statewide organization, New York Progressive Action Network. So I know that a lot of us, a lot of our neighbors and friends right now are living in fear and anxiety. But we need to know that there is a community of democracy defenders that we are a part of, and that every one of us, in every one of us's engagement is necessary and helpful. So we know tonight that the plan that the people who are putting in place is both heartless and punitive. It will backfire, and we will prevail. So what is tonight's format? Tonight's format, we have two major issues that we're going to be addressing. The first one is that we have peer core member, attorney Tela Troge, who will talk about the Shinnecock Nation's struggle for their sovereignty, in particular in light of the recent controversy with Southampton Town over the building on their own property, Westwoods, of a gas station. So Tila's going to give us an overview of that struggle over the last, for about, let's say about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we will have Q&A. And then the second portion of our meeting, we will pivot to have a robust discussion of actions that we can take to defend our own democracy. We will be highlighting immigration actions, healthcare, and we will also hear from a member of PEER who has been directly impacted by the illegal shutdown of USAID. So we will be recording the first half of this meeting for future broadcast on our YouTube channel. The second half we will not be recording. So we're very pleased tonight that our own core member, the attorney Tela Troge, has offered to help us understand what the Shinnecock Nation has been struggling through for a long time with the Southampton town. For those of you who don't know Tela, she is a member of the Shinnecock Nation. She graduated from Michigan State University with a law degree and also received certification in Indigenous Law and Policy from the Indigenous Law Program. She is also a founding member of the Shinnecock Kelp Farmers. So I'd like to turn it over now to Tela. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone is staying warm and enjoying the beauty of the snow falling as well. I'm so glad that you were able to join, and I hope that you can all become very vocal allies to the Shinnecock Nation as we struggle to assert our sovereignty. And so I just wanted to give a quick update about the litigation, give a little bit of background about what exactly is happening, because I know it can be a bit confusing and there's a lot of misinformation being spread, including through the use of AI videos that are just very harmful and damaging. So I don't want to take up too much time, but there are some fundamental things that I have to talk about. The first is called the Non-Intercourse Act, and this was an act that was passed in 1790 at the request of George Washington. So when we think about our Constitution and the beginning and the foundation of our country, we think of George Washington. So keep that in mind because this is something that was really important to him in order to maintain peace between the colonies and the Indian nations. And during the 1700s, there was a lot of competing interests for land from settlers. And so a deal was struck specifically with the Iroquois Nation, also known as the Haudenosaunee, is the politically correct term for the Haudenosaunee. But that law says it's a federal law that says that you can't alienate any land from indigenous people absent an express act of Congress. So the United States has to affirmatively approve any type of alienation of any type of land interest. And that can be the whole fee interest or a lease interest. It doesn't matter. Any interest in land requires the consent of the United States Congress. And so in 2019, when the Shinnecock Nation erected its monument signs on Sunrise Highway, we requested for the United States to do a search. Has the United States Congress ever approved any alienation of Shinnecock land, especially from the town of Southampton? And so the answer is no. There's never any United States act of Congress that authorized any type of taking of land from Shinnecock Nation. And so recently, last month, January 2nd of 2025, the nation as well as the town received a letter, a correspondence from the Secretary of the Interior, Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs. His name is Brian Newland. He's an attorney and the former chairman of a tribe called Bay Mills. And so he did a complete search and found nothing, but he also did a search of Southampton's records, which I will screen share in a little bit. And he found that not only was there no act of Congress, that Southampton, in all of its records going back to the 1600s, has always considered the land in question at Westwoods an Indian reservation. And the land has never been taxed. And I'll show you the zoning and the tax records because I spent many years of my young life in the dusty archives of the Suffolk County Clerk and the basement of the Southampton Town Hall, searching all of this. And so that brings me to a case that is called City of Sherrill versus the Oneida Indian Nation. And this was decided by Justice Ruth Ginsburg. I'm sure everybody knows who Justice Ginsburg is. On her deathbed, she proclaimed to one of her friends that this case was the greatest regret of her entire career. She really felt that she got this wrong. And when you're in law school and evidence, you learn that there's a special kind of truth to deathbed confessions because you know that you're going to pass away and sometimes you just want to get things off your chest. And so that was Justice Ginsburg's deathbed confession. And so the City of Sherrill versus Oneida Indian Nation case was decided in 2005. It was appealed to the Second Circuit. Second Circuit denied it, and that is why now today the Second Circuit is known as the court where Indian land claims go to die. It's very depressing, but we've come a long way since then. And in that case, the Oneida Indian Nation was attempting to buy back part of its ancestral territory using proceeds from its gaming operation. And Justice Ginsburg found that it was too disruptive to settled expectations for the Oneida Indian Nation to reassert its sovereignty on these lands, in particular because the land had been zoned and it had been taxed. And so in 2024, the town of Southampton filed a lawsuit trying to expand the City of Sherrill case on the Westwoods parcel, except that you can't do that because when we looked at the taxes and the zoning for Westwoods, we found that it had always been zoned as an Indian reservation and it had never been taxed. So already the fact patterns are completely different. Throwing all of that aside, the town attempted to have the court expand the City of Sherrill case to say that you can't really bring any type of claims within 60 years and that this case should also include land that has never been taxed and never been zoned, which is just outrageous. It's really ridiculous. And for those of you who are familiar with Shinnecock Nation, we underwent a 32-year process in the court system to have the United States government recognize us as a tribe. And how that initiated was through a litigation assistance for a land claim using the argument that New York State has violated the 1790 law, the Non-Intercourse Act. And so through that process, we were scrutinized. We had to prove who we were because the town of Southampton said, yeah, that might be Indian land. That's true, but there's no Indians left. So nobody can assert sovereignty over that. And it was rooted in racism, black and white racism, and we have all of that evidence. But the thing is that the BIA researchers, in trying to determine our genealogy, found that every single member of the Shinnecock Nation originated from a person who was born at Westwoods. That was our original homeland before the Southampton town forcefully removed us in 1859 when the railroad came through to the Shinnecock Neck. And a lot of you say, well, I didn't never heard anything about Shinnecock being removed. I mean, this is like, the Trail of Tears kind of things. And I read a lot. I've always read a lot since I was a young kid. I remember my Aunt Denise, she's on the Zoom, would buy me books when I was a little kid. And anyway, I have a very huge library. And so every reference that I've seen in Southampton history books said that it was such a sad and horrific time period that they didn't even like to write about it. And this is a town that wrote every injustice down, from enslaving our fetuses to selling us into slavery in the West Indies to having us kill all of our pets, our dogs. Those were all killed. So all of these horrible things were written down, but this event in particular was so horrible that the town of Southampton couldn't even write it down. So that just gives you a little bit of background, just so that you know how sacred this place is. This is literally the place of our ancestors. And when I go there as a Shinnecock person looking out, and I might be biased, but I think it's one of the beautiful places, the most beautiful places on earth. And I've been all around the earth. So being in that place where my ancestors have been for at least 13,000 years, I can't even describe it to you. It's just incredible. And that's what really drove me to spend all of those years in the archives, proving and differentiating it from the city of Sherrill case. Then comes in a case called Bay Mills. Remember, I told you that the assistant secretary for the Indian Affairs, Brian Newland, he was chairman of the Bay Mills tribe when this case happened. And basically what it was an attempt to evade sovereign immunity by suing individual members of the Bay Mills tribal leadership and alleging that sovereign immunity does not cloak them when they engage in an activity that is off reservation. And so Southampton adopted that case, just like they adopted the city of Sherrill case and the litigation that they filed. And they said that the Shinnecock Nation's leadership could be sued because they were acting off reservation. And so the United States government, which is staffed by experts, you've really got to be at the top of your class to work in the Department of the Interior Office of the Solicitor, which is the department that reviewed all of the documentation that I spent many years collecting and gathering and submitting. And they also did other, research. They went into the Southampton town records and they found that there were stark differences between the published record books and what the records actually say that are in the basement of the town of Southampton. And so those are the primary things that the town is arguing against us, that our tribal leadership is acting on land that is not considered a reservation, and that our title should be extinguished because we can't reassert sovereignty. And it doesn't, like, legally and factually, it's a very weak argument. And so I'm going to just share my screen just to give you a better idea of what I am talking about. This is an actual document that we submitted to the United States government. And I want to show you this zoning map. Can you all see it on your screen? This is an official zoning map. The color was added, but this part of my talk particularly is in response to someone named Diane Adams, who published an op-ed saying that we were lying, that the official town of Southampton zoning maps indicate that both Westwoods, which you see here, and the Shinnecock Neck are both zoned as Indian reservation. Now, this is my document, but I also have here, I just pulled it up. I went to the zoning maps. Here we're live. You could see, you can click on Hampton Bays to Shinnecock Hills zoning maps, and you will see that the town of Southampton has zoned Westwoods as an Indian reservation, just like they have zoned the Shinnecock Neck as an Indian reservation. So that takes care of half of the zoning argument that Justice Ginsburg said was the reason that the Oneidas could not assert jurisdiction in the city of Sherrill case. Okay, now we're going to go into the tax records. Now, the earliest tax records started in 1929 that I was able to find. And I did every couple years because it got to be a lot going through everything. But here you'll see a copy of the actual assessment roll going back to 1930. And you'll see that there's two pieces of land. There's the woodland, and it just says reservation land. But both of them are called reservation. And this, it says real property exempt for taxation on the basis of it being an Indian reservation. And here you see another description. It says Shinnecock Indian Reservation, and it talks about farmland and frame buildings. And that's the Shinnecock Neck. And then it's called the woodlot. Shinnecock Westwoods was always called the woodlot because that's where we would get wood, firewood to keep warm in the winter. And so that's 1930, 1936, 1948. You see the same thing. It's called the Shinnecock Indian Reservation, and it's exempted from taxation because it is an Indian reservation. And it goes on and on and on and on into modern day records. Here you see more modern day records. This is our Shinnecock Neck. We have all these. I'll just go down to Westwood since that's what we're talking about today. Here we go. And you can see here on the tax maps that the town of Southampton considers Westwoods to be the Shinnecock Indian Reservation. Shinnecock Indian Reservation. They're also called in other places Indian land, but here you see a more modern, this is from 2021, Shinnecock Indian Reservation, Indian Reservation. Anyway, my point is quite clearly, as you can see, that the town of Southampton has always considered Westwoods to be Indian reservation. Here we say Indian reservation, Indian reservation, Indian reservation, Indian reservation again on this record. And so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think that you get the picture that Westwoods, by all accounts, on every single piece, there we could not find one piece of evidence where the town of Southampton did not consider Westwoods to be an Indian reservation. Yet they are using this Bay Mills case to try to get around the fact that we have sovereign immunity as a tribal nation and the right to self-determination to conduct any type of economic development that we see fit to take care of the needs of our people, whether that be our children, our elders, or really any member of the tribe. And so I'm really concerned because the town supervisor is also echoing the same statement that this is not a reservation and that the town can assert zoning authority. And I know we all love Fred Thiel. I don't know if everyone knows that Fred Thiel started out as a Southampton town attorney. And this was in the 80s. I was born in 1987, but there's some correspondence that occurred a couple of months before I was born where Fred Thiel was like a very similar situation. Shinnecock Nation had wanted to construct a hotel and convention center, and the town of Southampton said, well, you can't do that because that land is zoned as residential R60 land. And so Fred Thiel wrote to the town and the state and asked, is this an Indian reservation and can we assign zoning to it? And very clearly, the town said no. The town of Southampton has no jurisdiction on Shinnecock Indian land. They are a sovereign government and they have the sole right to regulate the whatever activities occur on their land. So this has been settled way back at the beginning of Fred's career. And I know he's recently retired and had a wonderful, beautiful, long career. So this is going back a long time. Um, and so this litigation is just really it's factually faulty, it's legally faulty to the point where it is, can be considered by a reasonable person to just be harassment. Typically, like colonizers do these kinds of attacks during winter when resources are the lowest. It's very in line. But the scary thing is that the town supervisor, who, she ran her campaign against Cindy McNamara by saying that she had 35 years of experience as an attorney, is making these continually saying that, this is not an Indian reservation and bringing these false claims. And so it's really alarming. But the most recent thing that happened just about a week ago is that the town asked the judge to punish the nation because he said that we were evading being served with the summons and complaints because the address that we provided for our government building, they said, did not come up in the United States Postal Service database. Now, I don't know how much you guys work on voter registration. I hope that you all, maybe that's, I saw someone, what could we do? How about let's get some people, and this goes into the second part, let's get our friends and our family registered to vote. Now, there's one problem when you're registering to vote on Shinnecock. It's that we do not have United States Postal Service addresses. And that's not a situation that's unique to Shinnecock. There are maybe 2 Indian tribes in this entire country out of 574 federally recognized tribes and countless other tribes who have not yet been recognized but are still fighting for recognition that are not serviced by the United States government because we are sovereign entities. We are not considered technically to be part of the United States. And so the United States Postal Service doesn't serve us. And I don't know how many of you checked your mail, got an Amazon package today. I hope we're not using Amazon because they're a horrible company and Jeff Bezos is responsible for a lot of harm to people and planet. But anyway, just think of getting your mail and how convenient that is. We don't have that at Shinnecock. I remember during the pandemic, and I don't live on Shinnecock, but during the pandemic, we had to get our kids computers. And so we ordered them from Best Buy. And Best Buy said, okay, we need a street address. And I said, we don't have street addresses. And they said, well, then we can't deliver it. So I actually had a freight truck come to my home in Riverhead and drop off pallets of laptops, which I then had to take with my husband like 5 trips back and forth. Anyway, the story is that we do not have United States Postal Service, but the town of Southampton is asking the New York State court system to punish and penalize us, saying that we are evading this lawsuit, which again is based on their argument that this is not an Indian reservation, despite every single document from the town of Southampton calling our land an Indian reservation. And saying that we're evading and that we're being dishonest and that we're being deceitful to not only the court, but the town. And this is despite many invitations for the town to come and meet with us. I can say for sure that only our liaison with the town board, Michael Iacilli, has actually come to our government buildings, but we are, through the very good work of the Southampton Anti-Bias Task Force, attempting to say, hey, town of Southampton, our government buildings do exist. Just because they don't come up on the United States Postal Service, it doesn't mean it's not a very real person, a very real place. And so we've extended that invitation, just like we've extended many invitations to just talk about this with the town, to try to, there's 574 tribes recognized in the United States. All of them are neighbors with towns, and they have found ways to work with one another. Now, I just want to say one last thing, because I know that we have a lot of discussion in our next part. But I want to talk quickly about the doctrine of discovery. And the doctrine of discovery was a papal doctrine from the 1500s that said not white people had no right to land, and that white people, white Christians and Catholics, could take land from people who had brown or black skin because they didn't know what to do with their land. And shockingly enough, when you read the Southampton town record books, they open with just chapters going on about how they have good title to all of the land here because of the doctrine of discovery. And that was at the heart of Justice Ginsburg's decision in City of Sherrill versus Oneida Nation. She incorporated this papal doctrine from the 1500s, and it became American legal jurisprudence all the way up until 2025. And the town of Southampton in December of 2024 used the doctrine of discovery as the basis, asking the court to extinguish our title to Westwoods and allow them to assert zoning authority on it. Now, the doctrine of discovery was officially repudiated by the Pope and the Vatican in March of 2023. That's like accepted worldwide, that it was wrong. There was an apology that was made, yet the town of Southampton still continues. And so I hope everyone here who cares about justice can help us by coming to the town board meetings. You know, they're available on Zoom. They do like to hide the Zoom link, but it is available on the website. And if you don't have it, we can definitely circulate it. But, you know, if we have allies who will speak up and say, this is wrong, this is unjust, you need to respect Shinnecock sovereignty, work with the nation on a government to government basis. I think that we will come a long way as neighbors and a community to grow and to benefit everybody. And so I just want to really bring light to this great injustice that is happening. The amount of money that we are now having to expend on litigation for all of these false claims is unbelievable. At the same time, where almost every single home on Shinnecock territory is infested with black mold. The housing by far is substandard. We can't get mortgages. So we don't have any type of way to get any type of collateral. And our money should not be spent on litigators to fight against the town of Southampton during winter. You know, we need to feed our kids, we need to feed our elders, we need to take care of each other. And it's really a civil rights, a human rights violation that is happening locally to a group of people who are so disenfranchised that it's unbelievable. And any like assistance in speaking up at town board meetings to ask for it to stop and, you know, saying it's wrong would be really greatly appreciated. And I just ask that you all be the judge. Like, do you guys think that Westwoods is an Indian reservation based on the town of Southampton's records that you have seen so far? It's pretty clear.
Amen. Amen to
Yeah.
that. Thank you, Tela. Listen, first of all, thank you. You have shared an abundance of information in a very short period of time. So I just want everybody to know that this was recorded, so you can go back and you can look at it if you want, and please share it with friends once it's available online, so that you can, you know, we need to educate ourselves so that we can be advocates and allies for the Shinnecock Nation. And we do need to speak up at the town boards, write letters to the editor. Now, I see a couple of questions in the chat, so I think why don't we go there? I see Susan Steinman has a question. If you want to, Susan, unmute yourself and ask the question, please.
Yeah, it's in my mind that maybe some developer or other has their eye on this land. And my other question is, what is the driving force behind Southampton Town being so vindictive towards the nation? It seems to me that there's something, you know, they say follow the money. And my thought is that there's money to be made here, that it must be behind it.
Yeah.
Somebody is planning on making money out of Westwoods. So do you have any idea who these forces are and what they're up to?
So that's a really great question. And, we can speculate as much as, we want to. I think a larger issue is, I mean, think about what the Oneida Indian Nation was doing. They were using the success of their gaming operation to buy back their land. And I think that's the town of Southampton's worst nightmare because the tax base alone that they get off of land that they stole in violation of federal law is like unbelievable. And especially when you compare that to like Shinnecock, we don't have a tax base. It's really like appalling. But I've been in meetings with the town, and this is like within the past couple of years where the town itself is attempting to get us to sell them Westwoods. And you're like, what? What are you talking about? And it's like, we don't have enough land already for all of our tribal members. There's not enough land on Shinnecock for every enrolled tribal member who wants to live on Shinnecock to do so. That's just, we don't have enough land. And so I have been approached by the town council, and I shouldn't just say myself, but tribal leadership and myself have been in meetings where the town is trying to threaten us and say they're going to bring all these lawsuits and suggest that we could simply solve this by selling them the land. Specifically, they want to purchase the development rights on it. And they tell me, oh, Tela, you don't understand the value of land and you don't understand how much money Shinnecock could make. You guys need some money for housing and food and diapers. Well, we have it because we will buy the development rights from Westwoods from you. And we had to say, like, this is appalling. Like, we're in the 2020s. Stop taking our land. Like, it's ridiculous. And so I think that's a motivating factor. There's a lot of interest in developing the Westwoods parcel. The town has shared with us that they would like to develop affordable housing there. And that is their ultimate plan for Westwoods.
Wow. Wow. It's infuriating. I mean, I'm infuriated, so I cannot imagine how you would feel. Someone posted that you need a GoFundMe page to help with the legal fees, which maybe you do have, and if you do, share it. And I just want to drop in that not only obviously is the nation having to pay a lot of money on legal fees, but taxpayers in Southampton will be paying, $1 to $3 million a year on this really useless litigation. So I see John Crindle, or Crindler, has a question. John, if you want to unmute yourself and ask, please.
Yeah, sure. It's a simple question. What is the next step that's foreseen to advance this process? Thank you.
So we have extended an olive branch and an invitation to the town to come to us as a government to government relationship and try to use negotiation. We're very open to hearing concerns. We do want to hear the concerns of the neighbors and the community. And we also, as a tribal government, have the ultimate objective to protect the health, safety, and welfare of not only our tribal members, but everyone that we invite onto our tribal territory. And so there are very real, aspects and considerations that we do need to come to a meeting of the minds with the town of Southampton. I don't think it's appropriate to be in litigation. The town board vote, it was a split vote. Tommy John Schiavone, our new assemblyman, was against this litigation. He voted no. He said that he had reviewed the tax and zoning documents and he was confident that this was definitely a Shinnecock Indian reservation and that the town's lawsuit was completely wrong. Michael Iacilli also refused to join the litigation, saying that negotiation was the proper way to settle any disputes that we may have. However, Maria Moore, Bill Powell, and Cindy McNamara are just steadfast on continuing the litigation. And so that's really unfortunate. But for us, we are going to continue. We're not going to let New York State Court, which has no jurisdiction over sovereign Indian land, stop us. We're certainly not going to stop because the town of Southampton wants to assert control over us. And they've gone so far as to question the United States government, who again spent 3 years reviewing the entirety of Southampton's records. And they like to bring up this court case that occurred, and it spanned from 2003 to 2012. It was ultimately vacated, and yet today the town supervisor says, oh, we already litigated this. And, there's been new evidence by the title searchers. There's a lot of new information that the court didn't consider in that case, not to mention the fact that you can't use a vacated case for like any type of precedential value, though the town and the state both try to continue to do that. So, as a sovereign entity, we're going to continue. Whether the town of Southampton wants to talk to us or not is their, decision. But again, litigation it's not only cruel and wrong, but, I think that's why I said like to go to the town board meetings and just like speak up about how wrong this is, how wasteful it is of taxpayer money. It really is estimated to be 3 million a year. The filing that I saw, it was like 68 pages accusing us of lying about our United States Postal Service addresses, and then saying that because we gave postal PO boxes that we were being truthful, even though that's how we get our mail. Like they spent 68 pages, these two litigators. Imagine how much that is costing the town of Southampton, like taxpayers. I've never seen anything. And again, I've studied federal Indian law since 2010. I've studied thousands and thousands and thousands of court proceedings and different disputes, and I've never, ever seen anything like what the town of Southampton is trying to do. And I was shocked to see in 2024 a reliance on the doctrine of discovery. I mean, that should like really horrify anyone.
Yes, indeed. And absolutely. So I see that Tina has a question in the chat, so I'm going to ask her to unmute herself and ask the next question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I just read, I think in the Long Island Press, that the Department of the Interior reaffirmed that the Shinnecocks have sovereignty over this territory. And I'm wondering how the town can continue the lawsuit.
So a lot of people don't know this, but the town is not only continuing their lawsuit in the New York State Court, but they have also challenged with the IBIA, which is the Interior Board of Indian Appeals, the decision of the United States government. So that's like, that's really insane. On the same premise that, and they said, well, what records did they review? And can we have them? I said, they reviewed all of your records. You guys are the record keepers. You have all of the records. And also, the United States was astonished when they came out here. They said, they do this routinely. They, study chains of title, and they've never been to a place like the town of Southampton that completely tried to attempt to hide, destroy, or otherwise block them from viewing or accessing the town records. And so in that federal case that I told you they like to rely on, they hired this expert. His name is James Lynch. And so you'll hear a lot of the Hampton Bays residents say, oh, well, look at all the work that James Lynch did. James Lynch, in subsequent court hearings and proceedings, was found by a federal judge to have no credentials. His CV said like James Lynch, PhD, and the PhD was in these huge letters, bold, and the court asked him about it, and in tiny little letters it said PhD ABD. So what does that mean? That means that he never did his dissertation, so he's not a PhD. And so this court said, well, where do you get the information? And he said, oh, well, I don't do any research. I just present evidence that's best for my client. And so the judge is like, what do you mean you don't do any research and you're the expert witness on this case. And so the judge then found that in almost every proceeding that this man was hired to do, he found against the Indian tribe, no matter what it was, and all on faulty information that he just simply made up. And so the town is relying on 100% falsified, proven to be untrue, no factual or legal basis at all. um so it's really horrifying. It's really horrifying, and I don't think they ever expected that we would take this close a look at their records. I mean, I don't think that they ever thought that we would do that or could do that.
You know, it's like each layer of the onion that you peel back is worse than the last. It's shocking. We now go to Freda Black, who has a question in the chat. This is probably going to be our last one since we're going to have to pivot to our next portion. But Freda, could you please unmute yourself and ask Tela?
In addition.
Perhaps she's not with us. Freda?
I'm here. I just wasn't prepared to unmute. As someone who does not live downstate or anywhere near New York City or Long Island, I'd like to know in what ways, other than contributing money, which not all of us have a lot of, but to whom could we address letters of support or letters of complaint in order to support your case? Because, you know, I don't know if we have any standing, and also, are there any people on the state level to whom we can address our concerns about the unfairness and the illegality of what's being done to the Shinnecock Nation? Thank you.
Thank you. So that's a great question. I've seen some really great letters to the editor in Southampton Press, 27 East. So that's definitely a good place. I know a lot of people read and follow that. And that's also a place where a lot of misinformation is being printed. And I've called the editor of the paper. I'm like, why are you allowing misinformation to be printed? Like, are there no journalistic standards? And I'm told that, oh, anyone can write into the letter of the editor. And if we had to fact check everything that comes in, we just wouldn't have time to do all of that. But anyway, like countering that false information, like, for example, someone, Diane Adams, oh, it's a lie that Shinnecock, that Westwoods is zoned as Indian reservation. No, it's not. You could pull it. We all just did it live. We all pulled it up. It's definitely, anyway, countering in that paper particularly, just with truth and facts, I think is really powerful. But also, you know, anybody can write a letter to the town council or join the Zooms. I think we could probably work with LIPC to set up some type of action network. We don't currently have a GoFundMe for legal fees. But I think Action Network, maybe with the, you know, letter writing campaign, could have some type of optional, you know, assistance in that way. And we could set all of that up. In terms of the state unfortunately has similar arguments, and the town based their lawsuit off of the state's lawsuit against our monument sign. So we have been directing our efforts against the Attorney General, Letitia James, as well as the Governor, Kathy Hochul, and our tribal leadership has done a lot of legwork to try to, you know, also just negotiate on a government to government basis. So if you don't live locally in Southampton, but you still want to contribute, I would definitely suggest contacting Governor Hochul and the Attorney General, because there is the state action. There's about 3 active court cases, all about the Westwoods now. We've recently asked the court to take judicial review of the United States Interior's decision that our sovereignty is fully intact, that this is our ancestral territory, and that the Non-Intercourse Act that I talked about at the beginning of the call still fully protects our land. So that's an option for out-of-town supporters.
That's great. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tela. And thank you, everyone here. I mean, if I could just briefly summarize what the points that we need to write or speak to the town are, number one, the town has to support the Shinnecock sovereignty. Number two, drop the lawsuit. And number three, we urge the town to sit down and talk with the Shinnecock Nation to actually, be face to face and figure out the way forward. And Tila will let us know other actions that we can take, and we can share that with everybody who is with us this evening. So, Tila, we can't thank you enough for putting that together. That was really an excellent program, and we will continue to spread the word about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to listen and to support us in the future.
Okay, great. Okay, so that was wonderful. I'm going to actually now, because we're pivoting to the next part of our meeting,